VCT 2025 season is just around the corner, and it's time to talk about what are the expectations for each team. Today we will just be talking about the VCT Americas teams, all 12 teams that are in the league. I will be doing videos on the other regions as well, but we're starting with the Americas teams, talking about where we think from both a fan perspective and an org perspective, where we think these teams are going to place. So this is the board we have today, so let's look at our categories here. We have international contenders, which means you should be not only at internationals, but contending to win the tournament. So that is the highest of expectations that we have. Then we have the next one, qualify for internationals, so a team that would clearly be good enough in their own region to make it to the top spots to qualify for these internationals. Maybe not every single one, because there's only 2 spots, and then 3 spots, and then 4 spots, but those are at least the expectations for these teams heading into these international events. Then we have improve in region, so maybe teams looking to get a little bit more wins and, success within the Americas League that they didn't last year. We then have mid, so teams that are just going to be either in the same spot if they were bad or just kind of, around that mid-range. And then we have bad, so teams that are just going to be stinkers. And of course, this is all just my own opinion. You guys can have your own opinion. That's absolutely okay. You can disagree with my picks. Every single org should be expecting their team to do better than the previous or to, have a really good season. But of course, that is not exactly how things work. There has to be losers, there has to be winners. We will be starting from the top right, so that means we are starting with Crew Esports. So Crew lose a couple of players in MTA as well as Heat. Heat had a pretty good year for them. MTA not so much, but he was in and out of the lineup. So they bring back Bazzino, a player that has previously been on the org, as well as bringing in a new IGL in Adverso. Their year in 2024 was pretty up and down. They were really good during stage 1, which was a complete opposite of 2023, where in the regular season stage, they were just god-awful. They went winless. But then they had a resurgence in LCQ to be able to make it a champs, a tournament that they are just always at. They've been at every single champion so far. I do think Mazzino is a pretty good choice to bring in. He had a pretty solid year on Leviathan last year. We'll see if he can bring some of that success to a team he was previously on. But overall, I think Crew should be qualifying for internationals. Maybe not every single one, but I mean, that whole champ streak, I think there's a good chance that lives on. Even if you don't see them as a top 4 team in Americas, which I don't necessarily do. These are not power rankings. I'm not ranking these, one by one or anything like that. But I think they're good enough to qualify for 1, maybe 2 internationals this year. They are a solid team. If Adverso can come in and be really good for them as an IGL, then this team should, if they could just find some consistency, which was the problem last year, if they can find that, then they should be in a good spot. And I don't think that there's much more for them to do in the Americas. Aside from maybe win the Americas playoffs, but I think their eyes are on the prize. Moving on, we have Energy, a team that last year fell way short of expectations. Last year, they brought in Demon 1, Ethan, and Marv to kind of recreate the magic of the Optic roster from 2022 while bringing in the best player of 2023, Demon 1. But it ended up falling really short of expectations. I think that roster construction was very flawed, even though there was a lot of talent there. Ethan, as their IGL, he had a really good year in an individual performance perspective, but when it came to IGL, he was far from the right choice. Demon 1 fell way short of expectations. Marv had a really rough year. They ended up bringing back FNS and Som partway through the year, but it was too little too late. But now they've had time to cook with the roster. They have a new coach in Bonkar. They have Mata as well as Verno added to this roster, while keeping Ethan, FNS, and Som. And it's looked really good in the so far just 1 offseason event that we've seen them. I believe we will see them in at least 1 more. So expectations are pretty high for this team. I saw that Plat Chat put them in about S tier, which I think that's fair, but I don't want to just, throw them in that kind of tier right away because I felt that about them last year. I do think a lot of people are expecting them to be in the international contenders category, and, I can see the argument for that, but personally, I'm going to temper my expectations just a little bit and put them down in qualify for internationals. I think they're good enough to qualify for internationals. They have 2 very talented players that are coming in from tier 2 and a new coach who looks like a very solid addition. A lot of hope around this team, but I want to see more before I put them in the contenders category. They could easily get up there, but for now, I'm putting them there. Moving on, we have Evil Geniuses, a team that does have a different roster from last year, having their star player in Giacomo leave for G2, and they bring in Ye as well as Icy. At least Icy is the rumored addition. It was maybe going to be Sim, but Sim did not impress them enough for them to buy him out from TSM. So the rumor is Icy, which personally, no offense to Sim, I think that is the better choice. So honestly, on paper, this team is not bad. I think Ye is going to be a good addition. If he just gets his confidence back, he should have a good year. We're not expecting him to be 2022 Ye, but if he can just have a really solid year and just get his confidence back and having his play being kind of ironed at by Potter, then I think he's going to be fine. And Icy, coming off of being kicked off of G2, while he did have a good year, wasn't showing like superstar levels, which is why G2 decided to go with Giacomo instead. But I think he should be really solid for them. And the rest of the roster, I think overall is decent. You still have Derek, you still have Nature. Maybe Nature isn't like the best pick for IGL, but you could do worse, as well as Superman. So I think their goal and expectations should be improve within region. They had a pretty up and down year. Their stage 2 was pretty mediocre, but had some fun wins here and there. And stage 1, they got off to an abysmal start, but ended up getting some wins later in the stage. So I think if they can improve in the region, if they can, I mean, they're probably going to make playoffs because it's an eight team playoffs, but if they can get enough wins to, just look like a dangerous team that could maybe get up into this category, I think that should be the goal. So we will see what happens, but EG, I think they're in a pretty decent spot. All right, going straight down from that one, we have Loud. So during the offseason, Loud lost arguably their two most important players in Les as well as Sadak. So a longtime superstar player on their team and then a longtime IGL that has molded these players into superstars. So those are not easy replacements to make. They ended up bringing in Digizin as well as Vinny being the new IGL. They still have Kawazine, Tui's, and Pankata, so it's not the worst combination of players, but last year, we saw that as soon as they lost Ozpos, Sadak, he was trying different things, but they ran out of options pretty quick. So they lose those very important players, and in terms of their replacements, there's talent there, but nothing that I see as, particularly amazing. But I don't want to completely dunk on them and put them in the bad category. I think they're good enough to be at least mid, but I don't see them being, within this region of teams that are going to end up over here. I think mid is about where we are with them. Moving on, we have 100 Thieves, a team that entered the offseason with a lot of questions, and it feels like we just kind of have more questions with them now. So they ended up keeping the exact same roster from last year, aside from Bank moving on to Sentinels. They bring in Xander to be the new Smokes player. In terms of a replacement for Bank, I don't know if it's going to be an improvement or a downgrade. I think they're probably two players that have very similar skill sets and very similar skill levels. Maybe Xander ends up being better. I think that'd be very beneficial for them, obviously. But overall, I think with them, qualifying for the second tournament of the year in Masters Shanghai last year, with them missing out on both Madrid and Champs, they want to be qualifying for internationals this year. They want to be contenders for internationals. They did make it to top 4 at Shanghai, but I want to remind people that they did not have to go through the Swiss stage. They were automatically in playoffs, and they were up and down during those playoffs. Top 4 is still top 4, so I don't want to diminish their achievement, but even so, I don't know if I've seen enough from this team either at that tournament or within the Americas that I think this team is just going to pop off now and that this is the year. But I think overall, qualifying for internationals is the right spot from them. I think maybe they make one or two. I'm not exactly sure where I see them because, again, there's only so many spots for internationals. But in terms of expectations, I think the fans are expecting them to be at internationals, but not necessarily contenders. But, I saw a lot of comments at Shanghai, or at least during Shanghai, when I didn't pick 100 Thieves to win, that I was a complete idiot for that, but they didn't, so, that's how it went. But I think they can at least be there. So I think that is where I think they should be and hopefully what the fans in the org think. Moving on, we have the Ascension team from this year, 2Game Esports. So we had G2 be the Ascension team last year, and now we have 2G. So funny how that works. Where do I see this new team coming in? It's honestly really hard to tell because this is a team that I don't think people were expecting to win that Ascension tournament, but they kind of came out of nowhere and just started looking very good. However, they will be without Spike for at least the first half or first part of the season. Spike is not of age to play in the VCT yet, so as soon as he is, do expect him to be in the roster because he was fantastic for them in that Ascension tournament. They still have some solid talent, especially with players like Silence, so I think they should I think their expectations should be mid. I don't expect them to be, within the top half of this league, but I don't expect them to be a bad team either. I think they're better than some other teams that we're probably going to see down there. It's been a very interesting offseason because it seemed like almost every team got better this year, while 2Game is just a very big question mark. But overall, 2Game, I think that's where they're going to be. I hope they're competitive. I hope they make it hard for G2 to, keep that spot, because that's the team that they're fighting for that spot for. So I am very curious to see how they end up doing. Going straight down again, we are going to be talking about MIBR. Now, this is a team that heading into this offseason wasn't making a lot of noise. People didn't really know what they were going to do, and then all of a sudden they have Ospas. Ospas, of course, previously of Leviathan last year, Loud before that. He has a Champions title. One of the most experienced and one of the best players of all time in Valorant, I would say. He has been around the block for a long time, and he has consistently remained at the top of the VCT game. So I think getting him alone is a huge improvement for this team. However, they also got Noswer, a player that Ospas wanted to play with on Leviathan until Noswer got dropped from them in favor of Calm. So now you have that duo back together. I think they're going to be looking for a revenge tour kind of thing, especially when they face Leviathan. That's going to be a crazy match. But the rest of the roster is a lot of question marks. We know that Artzine is a good player, but one that we haven't seen, be super dominant yet. Maybe we see that change with some of the pressure off of him. But we also have two Brazilian tier 2 players in Cortesia and Xenom. I hope I'm saying those right. So those are two very big question marks. How are these tier 2 players going to do? Have MIBR built a team good enough to support top heavy talent that they have? We know Ospas is going to be great. We know Noswer is a solid player. We know Artzin should be good as well. How are those other two players going to do? Will it be enough for them to qualify for internationals? I don't know if that's where I would put them yet. Maybe seeing them at off-season events will change my mind, but for now, I think I'm going to put them in improving within the region. At the very least, they would be going from the basement of the Americas last year into what I would consider a pretty competitive team. So I think improving within the region, I think they probably want to be qualifying for internationals as well as like being contenders for them. Every team wants to be in those top 2 categories. That's just how it goes. But putting them in the improving in region category, I think that's where we should just set our expectations now. And then if they prove us wrong, then that's fine. It's always better to exceed expectations than to not meet them. Moving on, we have G2, a team that last year improved a lot as the season went along. Bit of a slow start at kickoff. They make the roster change to bring in Icy, and they have a pretty up and down stage 1, but then they end up qualifying for Masters Shanghai. Not only do they do that, they also get to the top 3 in the tournament. So very impressive work from the Ascension team. This is definitely the best Ascension team in the entire VCT, I would say right now. We'll see if the new teams coming in end up changing that, but with them only making one roster change of, swapping out Icy for Jogamo, I think that that puts this team in a really good spot. I know there have been talks about, Jogamo's not going to fit their slow play style, this and that, but I think if you're bringing in Jogamo, I think you know how he plays and you know how he's going to fit, or at least you have an idea of how you're going to play with him under. I don't think that we're going to see them as like the super slow team all the time this year. They have a very disciplined structure, but if they bring in a little bit of chaos and top superstar talent within Jogamo, I think if you can play both those styles at the same time, or at least, be able to adapt better, I think this puts this team in a very, very good spot. So I think because of that and because of how they performed at internationals last year, yes, their champions run was not what they wanted it to be, but hey, that to me, that's just growing pains. I think 2024 was the learning year for them, and I think 2025 is going to be the year where we see them contending for international tournaments. Will they end up winning one? I don't know, but I do think that we should at least put them in the tier of expecting them to get at least close. They're a very good team. They're one of the only teams that didn't make sweeping roster changes. All they did was swap out one player who's good for another player who was fantastic. Moving on, we have Furia. Is there more that needs to be said? Listen, overall, I feel kind of bad putting the 3 Brazilian teams this far down the list. I don't hate Brazil, I promise you. I just think that Furia hasn't done enough in the offseason to, improve their team that much at all. They lose Noswer, they drop Zand, and Zand wasn't an amazing player or anything, but the players that they brought in, Heat should be good, Rafa, maybe. They have a new coach as well, but the core of MW's era, Khalil and Havoc, I don't see them doing much more this year than what they did last year. And they are actually a decent team by the end of the year. People forget, but they got that win over 100 Thieves and got some pretty solid upset wins during stage 2. Still wasn't enough to make playoffs or anything, but they were still, that was at least there was something there. But with what they've lost in the offseason, I don't know if we're going to see that again. I don't think we're going to see them in the playoffs. I think this is yet again a basement team. I hope I'm wrong. I don't want Brazil to be this region that is just all at the bottom of every, tier list and whatnot. However, which is what I've seen of these 3 teams, I think, maybe 2 Game has the potential to, be within the, improve/good in region. But for now, Furia is in the bad category. That's just where I see them. Moving on, we have C9. Now, C9 is a very interesting team. They have very recently dropped their new IGL in Rossi in favor of bringing back Mitch. Mitch is a good player, and they played with him at the Red Bull Homeground Qualifier event, and they did well there. They still have Oxy. I think the goal with Oxy is to get him to internationals this year, because I think if we see him at, Bangkok or Toronto or Paris, I think we will be talking about Oxy like one of the best players in the world. However, you have to make it there. And does the rest of the C9 roster inspire the confidence in me to say that they're going to make it to at least one event? They've been spinning their wheels for years, just making roster change after roster change while not putting together a roster that I see as particularly competitive. Overall, I think they're a good team. I think any team with Oxy on it should at least be trying to qualify for internationals. But is that where their fan base sees them, especially since they made another roster swap, very, early before the season, especially after they did very well at the Red Bull Homeground event, which had Rossi on the roster. So I don't know. I don't know if they have enough shooters on that team to really inspire a lot of confidence in me. I kind of want to put them in mid, but it's like, can I see them really improving in the region when the last 2 years have gone the exact same way for them? I also just changed the category name to good in region for that one, but I think overall, I think mid. I think mid is where we're going to see them. I'm sorry. I just don't know if I see this team pushing their way past some of the other better teams in the Americas. But hey, we will see. Maybe this is the year C9 actually does something. Moving on, we have Leviathan, a team that started the offseason by taking a couple L's in terms of losing their 2 best players in 2024 in Ospas and Mazzino. So they ended up bringing in Demon 1 and Natank to be the new additions to the roster, and there are worse replacements to get. Don't know a lot about Natank, but I've heard good things about him. Apparently he is a very talented player. Demon 1, we know what he can do, but he hasn't done a ton since 2023, a pretty rough 2024, but also he wasn't put in the best spot. Now he's reuniting with a former teammate in Com. Maybe that'll help stir something up, and I think the word is that Tex is going to be the duelist for the team, and Demon 1 is going to be Smokes. Maybe that ends up working out. We know that Demon 1 can play Smokes, but is he particularly elite on it versus, how he is on Jet, for example? But with the duelist meta being dominated by Neon and Raze and, these more, dive entry kind of duelist characters, Demon 1 isn't the best at entering. So maybe playing a Smokes role where he can play a bit more laid back, but also just, have the space to just really, focus on his game. I think he should be good for them. So while I think they definitely took some big losses this offseason, and I don't see them necessarily qualifying for internationals, I think they're going to at least be good in their region. They have enough talent there for me to say, yeah, this team is good. I just don't know if they're going to be great like they were, at least at times last year. They still made top 3 at champions. So I don't know if they're going to be the same as last year where they're, kind of up and down, but still at least a top team in the region. But they have enough pieces there to at least be solid. Last but not least, we have Sentinels. So Sentinels are a team that won an international tournament last year, but during the offseason, they lost 2 very important players to them. They lost Tens, a long-standing member of that roster, and one of, if not the most popular Valorant player ever. He retired, and so did the Brazilian player that they had in Saucy. Saucy's skill level wasn't maybe the greatest that you could have gotten, but he was still really clutch for them, and just that overall veteran experience of the game and Esports really showed at some really big moments for Sentinels. And the replacements that they brought in are Bank from 100 Thieves, as well as getting Narrate who was previously on Carmine Corp. So Narrate had a really good year on Carmine Corp. Can he replicate that again? We will see. So far, their offseason results up and down, and there are some questions about what roles they're going to play, but I think they used their tournament in the Sin City Classic to try out some different things, with John QT playing Initiator, Narrate maybe playing a bit of Sentinel. I don't know if we're going to see that much this season, but you know, I understand like the theory behind it. We'll see how it ends up going, but overall they have some really good shooters. I think Sentinels fans are going to love Bang. He's a really clutch player. I think he's going to be really good in that more traditional controller role. So I think overall, while I don't know if this roster is better than last year's per se, I think they should at least be in the international contenders category. You don't win an international last year, keep most of that roster, bring in some, in theory, very good pieces, and not expect to, you know, be contending to win these international events. Will they end up doing it? I don't know. There's a lot of teams, and only 3 teams can win an international per year, so that's how I see it for now. Again, I think teams like Energy could maybe find their way up into this category, but for now, I'm tempering my expectations because I want to see more. We've seen expectations get the better of us many times, especially with Energy. So this is my ranking right now. So let me know in the comment section down below what you think of my ranking. What would your ranking be? Who do you see qualifying for internationals? What surprise team do you think is going to come out of nowhere? Because there's no way that, you know, our, recency bias based expectations are going to be 100% correct. There's always surprise teams. No one saw Gen G or Team Heretics doing anything last year, and look at the years they had. So there's definitely going to be surprise teams. Are there any in the Americas? Maybe MIBR, maybe Evil Geniuses. We will see. But let me know what you guys think. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.